President Trump just proposed the biggest tax reform and reduction plan since Ronald Reagan. But will it make it through a Congress who so far hasn't done much? And cutting taxes to light up the economy used to be something that Republicans and Democrats actually agreed on.
In short, it is a paradoxical truth that tax rates are too high today and tax revenues are too low. And the soundest way to raise the revenues in the long run is to cut the rates now. And the reason is that only full employment can balance the budget, and tax reduction can pave the way to that employment. The purpose of cutting taxes now is not to incur a budget deficit, but to achieve the more prosperous, expanding economy, which can bring a budget surplus.
Well, John Goodman has been hailed as the father of health savings accounts and the man behind such revolutionary ideas as IRAs and 401ks. And if any of you have anything put away for retirement, you might want to thank him. He's also the founder of the Goodman Institute for Public Policy Research, which includes the Tax Center, the only think tank that evaluates tax policy based on sound economic principles without a partisan spin. Would you please welcome a good friend, John Goodman. John, great to have you here.
Thank you.
John, I guess they're thanking you for the 401ks and the IRAs, but let's get right to the heart of this. This is not a partisan matter. Tax reform. We just saw John F. Kennedy, clearly a Democrat, led one of the greatest tax reductions in American history. Why is this not really a partisan issue?
It should not be partisan. Both parties should be for this. Everybody knows that we have a terrible corporate tax structure, highest corporate tax rate among the developed countries. It's pushing capital offshore, which means it pushes jobs offshore. It should be in everyone's interest to bring the capital back home, create the jobs back home.
But you know, Republicans, if they say that, sometimes it sounds like, okay, great, but I'm not a corporation. I'm just a guy that's standing on a hard concrete floor all day, lifting heavy stuff. Tell me, why do I care what the corporate tax rate is?
Oh, listen, the economists I work with have modeled this. They're the best tax economists in the world. Lawrence Kotlikoff at Boston University, Alan Auerbach at Berkeley, and they tell us that if the Republican proposal, if we could pass that as is right now, would bring $11 trillion into the United States, would create jobs. The average family would see an increase in income of $4,000 a year.
$4,000 a year?
Yeah, income has been stagnant for these folks forever. And all of a sudden, they'd have more spending, more income, because that capital comes back home.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of people squeal like pigs at, fall season when they're about to be slaughtered for the season, over the fact they say, well, if you have these tax cuts, some of them are going to come at the expense of deductions, and deductions are important. Which should Americans care most about, getting a deduction or getting a reduction of the rate?
Well, if it were up to me, we would have one simple flat tax, and that would be it. There would be no deductions. Now, in the Republican plan, there are two. You get a deduction for charitable contributions and for your mortgage interest, and that's it. So most people will be able to fill out their tax return on a postcard.
How many of you would appreciate a tax simplification where your entire tax filing could be done on a postcard? Would anybody like that? I got to be honest, John, I really wasn't expecting to say, no, we like filling out all those papers. We like going to the CPA with a shoebox full of stuff and receipts. But nobody likes it. Everybody hates the IRS. Everybody hates tax time. This would, in fact, make it simpler and less expensive.
Absolutely. I'll tell you something else. I don't think there's a single member of the Ways and Means Committee in the House. This is the committee that writes our tax laws. I don't think there's a one that fills out his own tax return. It's too complicated. And these are the guys who write the tax law.
It was before the tax proposal was even announced. You had guys like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. They went to the microphones and they began to say, well, here we go again. This is a tax break for the rich.
Right.
So what's wrong with what they're saying? Is that true? Is it not true?
The truth of the matter is that every single tax bill Republican tax bill, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, has made the code more progressive because it's taken low-income people off the payroll. The reason half the people in America are not paying the income tax is because of Republican tax laws. The Democrats didn't want to take them off the tax rolls. Republicans did it.
So we're talking about the fact that half of America pays nothing in income tax.
Zero.
You know, if some of them are feeling bad about that, let me just say to you, I would be very happy if you would like to pay some of my taxes so you could feel more American. You know, I don't know how many people will remember the old announcer Arthur Godfrey.
Yes.
By saying, some of you say, ugh, you're old if you remember him. But Arthur Godfrey used to say, I am a proud tax-paying American, but I could be just as proud for half the money.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of Americans feel that way.
Yes.
I talked to the president about taking this piecemeal rather than one great big bundle, because what I fear, John, is that when you put it all together, you always have some senator or congressman that says, oh, you know, 99 of the 100 things in that bill I like, but that one I couldn't go with, and that's why I voted against it. Would it be better to put it in pieces and make them stand up and be accountable for their vote?
Well, it might be, but it's that corporate tax reform that brings in capital that makes it possible to lower the rates on the personal side. So there is a connection.
Well, you know, and I've always tried to tell people that when they hear about corporate tax, and some people say, let's raise it on the corporations, corporations really officially don't pay taxes because they build it into the cost of their services and their products. So if you reach for a loaf of bread, if you buy a car, if you buy a suit, or anything you buy, the corporation that created it and got it to you adds all of those taxes into the cost. So if you reduce the corporate rate, it's the consumer who ultimately will end up better off.
Yes, and we're finding it's also the workers. Very important.
Well, I think a lot of Americans would love to see a plan and would love to see it, especially if it could be bipartisan. And maybe it could. After all, we could hold up the example of John F. Kennedy as well as Ronald Reagan and say to Congress, get the job done. I think we all feel that way. Let's see that happen. John Goodman, great to have you here.
Thank you, Ken.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.